My name is Margaret Lorne, 61 years old, a retired literature teacher in Vermont. Most of my life was chalk dust and paperbacks, lesson plans scribbled late at night. After my husband passed, it was just me and my daughter, Alina. We clawed our way through debts and winters so cold the pipes froze solid. We ate soup so thin it was more water than broth, but we made it. And today, her wedding day, I thought I would finally see the sweetness of all those years of survival. That morning, the farm was dressed in sunlight. Early autumn leaves burned red and gold along the maple trees. Ribbons of white tied neatly to wooden chairs swayed in the breeze. I walked the long hall with a small box of extra hairpins for the bridesmaids. The lavender bouquets along the walls carried a scent I hadn't smelled in years, the same scent I once hung upside down from our porch rafters, praying it would last through winter. I slowed near a side hallway. The groom's dressing room door was cracked open, and I wasn't trying to listen, God knows I wasn't. But a voice slid out like smoke from under a door. A man's voice, not the groom's, but his older brother's. "1 year," he whispered, a laugh under his breath. "Once the land is in his name, Alina won't be seeing him anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My fingers went numb, the box of pins slipped from my hands, scattering across the wooden floor. Tiny clinks echoed in the silence. I froze, back pressed against the cool window frame, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Once the land is in his name, she won't see him anymore. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't teasing. It was a plan. Outside the window, children chased each other under strings of paper flags, and the string quartet tuned their violins in warm sunlight. But to me, the world suddenly felt staged, like a play performed for an audience too blind to notice the cracks in the set. I thought of Alina, my Alina, who had sat for hours as a little girl at that battered old piano in our living room, playing the same wrong notes over and over until she got it right. She believed in love the way she believed in music, that if you just kept at it long enough, it would sound beautiful. She had no idea. For a long moment, I stood rooted in place, torn between rage and despair. I could storm in, I could shout, I could ruin this wedding with one sentence. But then I pictured Alina's face, glowing with trust, and I knew, if I shattered her dream today, she would only see me as the enemy. So I bent down, gathered the fallen pins with trembling hands, and forced myself forward. I smiled when I passed the photographer, nodded politely at the musicians, adjusted my shawl as if nothing had happened. To anyone watching, I was the calm, proud mother of the bride. But as I sat in the front pew and the chapel doors opened, and Alina appeared in her lace gown with eyes shining brighter than the morning sun, I whispered to myself, "My daughter, you don't know what I just heard." And right there, as she walked toward a man I no longer trusted, I made my vow. I would not ruin her day with anger, but I would not let anyone steal her tomorrow. Silence became my shield, and behind that silence I began to plan. For the rest of that ceremony, I clapped when I was supposed to. I posed for photographs. I hugged relatives I hadn't seen in years. On the outside, I was the picture of a proud mother. But inside, every smile felt like it had sharp edges. Every cheer for the couple cut a little deeper because I knew the truth. This wasn't a love story. It was a transaction. The more I sat there, the more old memories came rushing back, memories I had brushed off at the time. Now, each one felt like a flashing warning sign I had ignored. I remembered the very first time he came to our house. While Alina was in the kitchen making coffee, I caught him glancing around the living room, not at the family photos, not at the bookshelves, but at the stack of property tax files on the counter. His eyes lingered too long, like someone measuring value instead of making conversation. Then there was the night last winter when he leaned back after dinner, tapped his glass, and said, You know, this land's going to be worth a fortune once the new road goes through. He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. Eleanor laughed it off, thinking he was just being practical, but I remembered the way his jaw tightened when he thought no one was watching. Another time, at Thanksgiving, Eleanor was running late. He arrived alone, carrying a smile that felt pasted on. Traffic was terrible, he said, but 2 hours earlier, I had seen the photo he posted online. Champagne flutes clinking at brunch with his friends. I told myself it didn't matter. Young people, I thought, they don't value punctuality the way we used to, but deep down it bothered me. And then there were the little slights. The time I shared Eleanor's favorite cookie recipe, the one she grew up begging me to make every Christmas. I printed it neatly on a card, placed it in his hand. Later I found it crumpled in the trash. Not forgotten, discarded. The night of Eleanor's 30th birthday, I stood to give a toast, simple and from the heart, but before I could speak, he leaned over and whispered, "Keep it short, okay?" My hands shook as I lifted my glass. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just blunt, just young, just adjusting. But piece by piece, it was more than that. It was erosion. He wasn't joining our family. He was stripping it down, brick by brick, until there was no space for me left in my own daughter's life. And Eleanor, sweet Eleanor, was slipping further away without even realizing it. The phone calls grew shorter, the visits fewer. Her words began to sound like his. "We need boundaries. We'll see about the holidays. She says we don't have to do everything with family." I heard my daughter's voice, but the script wasn't hers. By the time the wedding rolled around, I had convinced myself these were just growing pains. That marriage changes people, that I had to step back. But then that whisper, that laugh in the hallway, that plan spoken so easily, like my daughter was just a means to an end. I sat in the front pew, staring at the man my daughter thought was her forever, and all I could think was, he's already planning her expiration date. So I made another vow that day. If he was playing chess, then he underestimated me. Because I had been playing it my entire life, through widowhood, through debt, through raising Eleanor alone. He thought I was just a quiet mother with a soft smile. He didn't know that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And as the guests cheered and the champagne flowed, I smoothed my dress, folded my hands, and let him believe he had already won. The day after the wedding, while the newlyweds were off smiling for photographs on some vineyard lawn, I sat in a lawyer's office with a folder in my lap. The air smelled like leather and old paper, the kind of place where decisions were carved into stone. I slid the folder across the desk. Inside were the deeds, the savings, the farm that had carried our family name for 3 generations. "Put it all into a trust," I said, my voice steady. "For Eleanor, only Eleanor. No one else touches it." The lawyer, a man I'd known since he was a boy in my classroom, looked up, surprised. "Are you sure, Margaret? This will lock everything." "Good," I answered. "That's exactly what I want." Because while the world had been clapping and cheering, I had been listening. And I knew now that the man my daughter married wasn't dreaming of forever. He was drawing up an exit plan. Weeks later, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, too polished for our small town. "Mrs. Lorne, my name is Daniel. I've been retained by your son-in-law to handle certain property transfers. He mentioned the farmland would soon be in his name." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to clear his throat. Then I said, "Tell him to send you another retainer check, because that land, it's untouchable." I hung up before he could reply. Not long after, the cracks began to show. Eleanor came over one night, her face pale, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mom," she whispered, "he keeps asking about the trust, about Dad's savings. Why is he so obsessed with money?" I took a deep breath and pulled out a copy of the documents. The legal papers were thick, stamped official. When Eleanor's eyes moved down the page, I saw the moment the truth hit her. She pressed her hand to her mouth, shaking her head. He was trying to borrow against your land, I said softly. But he couldn't, because it doesn't belong to him. It never will. Tears spilled down her cheeks. For a moment she looked like that little girl again, the one who used to sit at the piano with her hair falling into her eyes, struggling through scales until she got it right. And just like then, I pulled her close, steadying her as her world shifted. It didn't take long after that. The arguments started, the excuses piled up. He grew restless, frustrated, and then one evening he stormed out, the screen door banging behind him. Alina stood in my kitchen, broken but unburdened. I thought it was over, but I was wrong, because one night, long after the dishes were washed and the lamps dimmed, I heard his car crunch up the gravel drive. He walked into my living room like a man on trial, his shoulders hunched, his eyes wild, and then he dropped to his knees. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "Just unlock the trust. Give me a chance to prove myself. I swear I'll change." I stared at him, this man who had smiled through wedding vows with lies already inked behind his eyes. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but sharp as glass. "Marriage is a vow, not a contract, and you don't get second chances for treating my daughter like a line item. You've already proven yourself." His face hardened, just for a flicker, before he stood and walked out the door. I watched his taillights fade into the dark, and with them the last of his power over us. That night I sat at the kitchen table, papers spread before me, and for the first time in months I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The game was over. Not because I shouted, not because I made a scene, but because I had prepared. He thought I was just a mother. He forgot I was also a widow who'd survived worse storms, a woman who'd rebuilt a life from ashes. He thought kindness meant weakness. He never understood it was my armor. And now my daughter was free. He didn't leave right away. Like a storm that refuses to break, he lingered for weeks, texts, voicemails, hollow apologies delivered through friends. He posted photographs of smiling dinners, captioned with words like forever and family, as though a filter could rewrite the truth. But the trust was sealed, the land untouchable, and Alina, my Alina, began to see through the performance. The glow in her eyes dimmed whenever his name appeared on her phone. The distance between them grew until one morning she walked into my kitchen with her suitcase, her hair damp from the rain. She set the bag down, looked at me, and simply said, "I'm done." I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I put the kettle on, poured her a cup of tea, and let her rest her head on my shoulder, because this wasn't victory. It was survival. And sometimes that has to be enough. Weeks passed. The house, once so quiet I could hear the pipes creak in the walls, began to fill again. Alina hummed while cooking, left her shoes by the door, filled the fridge with groceries I hadn't asked for. She pulled the old piano bench from storage, dusted it off, and started teaching neighborhood kids their first clumsy scales. The sound of music drifted through the windows again, off-key, imperfect, but real. The farm stayed in our name. The soil my husband once tilled, the land our family had built its roots upon, remained intact, but more importantly, so did Alina's spirit. One night, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, the glow from the lamp soft on her face. "Mom," she whispered, "if you hadn't protected me, I would have lost everything." I reached across the table, took her hand in mine. "No," I said gently. "You would have lost him, and that was never everything." The seasons turned. Autumn faded to winter, and snow laid itself across the farm in quiet sheets. I stood at the window, a mug warming my hands, watching the fields rest beneath the frost. My life hadn't gone back to what it was. It never would. But it had become something steadier, something truer. Alina's laughter echoed from the next room, mingling with the clumsy notes of a child's first piano lesson. And in that sound, I heard proof that I hadn't just saved land or money. I had saved what mattered. Her hope, her future, her belief that she was worth more than someone's scheme. People say silence is weakness, but I know better. Silence is strategy. It is strength wrapped in patience. And sometimes it is the only way to protect what we love, So if you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or told that your kindness makes you powerless, remember this: kindness is not surrender. Quiet is not defeat, and protecting the ones you love doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it simply means being ready when the storm comes, and holding your ground until the sky clears.